I cheated on my husband with one of his friends and now I don't know what to do. I want him back, my life is terrible without him. I made a horrible mistake, and now I'm in such a predicament that I'm at a loss for what to do next. I'm merely looking for assistance, but if you're being harsh, please understand that you've made a horrible mistake. This is a long and winding story. Despite the fact that my husband, a 26-year-old man, and I, a 23-year-old woman, have only been married for approximately 3 months, we have been dating since my sophomore year of high school, his senior year. He went to college and we made sure I went to the same school. He even turned down a better scholarship to attend a school that I had a better chance of getting into because he was one of the smart kids and I was one of the average kids, and when he finished, he immediately started working so that he could support us, and I dropped out because he knew I hated school. He is now employed as a software engineer right now, and we have 2 children, leaving company unnamed obviously. Unfortunately, I had to write such a long introduction because I simply wanted to emphasize how much I adore him and appreciate all he has done for me. I wouldn't exchange him for anything in the world. As long as I stay at home and take care of the typical cleaning, cooking, and housekeeping, my wife and I have a good working relationship, and we both put up a lot of effort to keep things running well. Firstly, I should clarify that my physical attraction to him has altered while we were in college, which I should explain more below. Since he started working, he's been working less and going to the gym less often than before. His weight isn't excessive, but it's evident that he doesn't have as much muscle as he used to, and the things he used to have in college, such as his six-pack, which he is well aware that I used to like, are long gone. He may have suffered from lower testosterone levels as a result of less and less intensity when we do have it compared to previous years. Beginning a few months ago, one of his closest pals, whom I'll refer to as David, started dropping around to spend out with him. Normally, I don't love spending too much time with his friends, but David and I hit it off immediately away. David and I hit it well, and my husband was delighted that I was finally getting along with his pals. However, as is customary for him, he returned to work and began spending less and less time with me, which may have been one of the reasons I cheated on my husband. When we were getting married, he told me that we would not lose touch like in the movies and that he would not abandon me for business, but I feel that is exactly what happened. Several hours before my husband returned home, David stopped over to see how we were getting along, and we started to hang out together. Every activity that I felt my husband should have done with me, we did together. We binge-watched Netflix, spoke about anything and everything, went to the movies, and whenever people saw us, they commented on how happy I looked, which I think you were at the time as well. If David didn't have class, he's working on his master's degree, he started coming over to spend out with me more often than with my husband, and therefore began arriving earlier and earlier in the day until he was arriving at the beginning of the day. When he came over and we began binge-watching Netflix one morning, I didn't have as many clothes on as normal since he arrived at about 9 a.m., which was somewhat earlier than intended, but I was already so comfortable with him that it didn't matter. I was only wearing a big shirt and some underwear, and I didn't realize until it was too late that I wasn't wearing a bra, so I felt awkward. Then David, as a joke, took off his clothes and climbed into bed next to me saying it was undies time, and he was abnormally close, but I ended up moving in even closer. He placed his hand on my thigh, and I moved to sit between his legs, and before I knew it, he twisted me around and began grinding an erection against me, and I kissed him. I didn't intend for it to go any further, but he was everything that my husband wasn't anymore. He was still built, and I could tell he really wanted me more than my own husband had, so we ended up having, of course, I trusted him, so we never used protection throughout that day, and he gave me the opportunity to feel ways and do things I hadn't done in so long. I expected to feel bad right away, but I didn't. I was just happy to be desired, wanted, and satisfied again. David and I continued this relationship for months, and I ended up giving him the nickname hubby because I truly felt like he was my true husband the way he treated me, but of course, he began to become possessive, as men do, and this is where the major problems began. He wanted my wedding ring off whenever we had, and I ended up losing it. Which my husband instantly noticed since I made a point of never taking it off. But it wasn't the only thing. David urged me to stop kissing my husband or really treating him like he was my husband at all, and I did it, and I treated my husband like because he misled me into feeling he was a lousy husband and person for abandoning me so completely. I went back on birth control, and we never used protection since he didn't like it, and I never complained because I simply liked being taken again. I stopped kissing my spouse, placed as much space between us in bed as possible, and resolved never to have with him again. When I was furious or frustrated, I would call him fat and ugly, which ruined my marriage. David was still around, and I guess my husband realized how in love I was with David because he began making accusations, and of course David became possessive again, so when my husband told him he couldn't come over anymore, He sent my husband months worth of the pictures, videos, and messages we had made and sent each other as some sick payback. When my husband arrived home, he was enraged and shouted and flung things at me, and I had no clue what to do. I knew that David didn't care about me as much as my husband did if he was ready to expose me like that. He began ranting about how hard he was working, as if I didn't assist around the home, and he smashed many of my personal stuff. He was screaming in the corner, muttering about how he wanted to kill himself, and I was terrified because he was lashing out at random. He continued asking me, half yelling, half sobbing, how often and how long it had been going on, and I broke down and began weeping as well, telling him everything. He was enraged again when he watched the footage on his phone because I told David the first loved him, that he was better than my husband, and other insulting things. He saw in the tapes that we had in our marriage bed and that we never wore a condom and that he always completed within me, and I could feel something in him, just maybe because he was my first time back in high school and I didn't let him do any of that until we were married. He began clawing at his skin, injuring himself in strange ways, and insulting himself in the same way I would insult him when I was upset, and I was afraid he was going mad. Because of the ranting, the neighbors contacted the cops, who took his side a bit more than mine and asked me if I had someplace else to stay, so I don't know whether he was hospitalized or not. Now I live with my mother and work part-time again, and I regret everything. Though I haven't been able to completely detach myself from David, I believe he began to care for me when my husband abandoned me, and he's been there for me ever since. David now refers to me as wifey, which hurts since I truly just want my husband back. We haven't formally divorced, but he won't speak to me, reply my messages, or do anything else. If I send a third party there, he just instructs them to inform me that he wants to divorce me and that I should get a lawyer. I'm not sure how I'll fare in the divorce since he paid for everything and David has a mound of proof on me cheating. I simply want this to be done and over with. What can I do to reclaim him? And how will I fare in a divorce if I don't? Update: immediately after the publication of this story, I was able to reach my husband's sister, who told me that he is not in a good emotional state. Her husband hasn't been eating and has lost a significant amount of weight, and he only does work, sleep, and eat every other day or so, according to her. In addition, she alleges that I have caused him to suffer practically irrevocable damage to his self-confidence, as he is now afraid to go out in public because he fears that people would laugh at him. To be quite honest, I don't see how his mental health is my responsibility. It is his response and choice to do what he is doing that I am responsible for. In the meanwhile, she continues to press me to sign the form and threatens me with the documentation David sent to him. I'm not going to attempt to get him back until I know he isn't going to do anything drastic like what he did the night he found out what had happened.